In 1845, 2 ships entered the Arctic and never returned.
What happened to the Franklin expedition remains one of history's greatest mysteries.
In 1845, the British Empire stood at the peak of its naval power, and it was during this period that the last great geographical ambition emerged, the Northwest Passage. This was meant to be a sea route through the Arctic waters of Canada that would connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, giving Britain a strategic advantage in global trade. After many failed expeditions, the decision became radical, to send the most prepared Arctic mission in history. For this expedition, 2 ships were prepared, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror. These were not ordinary vessels, but modernized military research ships with reinforced metal hulls, additional ice protection, and steam engines installed to ensure movement even without wind. The ships were loaded with years' worth of supplies, canned food, dried meat, flour, medicine, coal, and equipment for long-term survival in complete isolation. The crew consisted of 134 men at the start of the expedition. In this exact composition, the ships left London and began their journey toward the Arctic. But already during the crossing of the Atlantic, the first change occurred. At an intermediate stop, 5 sailors were removed from the expedition. According to unofficial information, the reason was disciplinary problems, including drunkenness. After this, the expedition continued its journey with approximately 129 men. The expedition was led by Sir John Franklin, an experienced but already elderly polar officer, regarded as a symbol of British Arctic exploration and a man believed capable of completing a mission that previous expeditions had failed to achieve. On May 19, 1845, the ships departed from the port of Greenhithe in London. Officially, the mission was presented as another scientific expedition. But the atmosphere among the crew was already mixed. Some men felt pride, while others felt hidden anxiety, knowing that previous Arctic expeditions often never returned. After leaving Britain, the expedition followed the standard route through the Atlantic toward the Arctic. The first months passed relatively calmly, training exercises, observations, navigation, and the routine of daily life at sea. In 1845, the expedition was seen for the last time by European whalers in the area of Baffin Bay. After that, it disappeared from all official observations. The ships then entered the maze of the Canadian Arctic archipelago. It was here that the critical moment began, the gradual entrapment in ice. At first, this did not cause panic. Wintering in the ice was a normal practice for polar expeditions. The crew organized daily life, maintained discipline, carried out repairs, continued observations, and waited for spring. But spring arrived, and nothing changed. The ice did not retreat. The ships remained trapped. At first, this was seen as a delay, then as a serious challenge, and eventually as complete isolation. Months of waiting turned into a routine of survival. Inside the ships, strict discipline was maintained, regular duties, maintenance work, and attempts to preserve the crew's morale. But isolation gradually changed people's behavior. Fatigue, irritation, and psychological pressure began to grow. Around this same period, the first burials appeared, 3 graves on Beechey Island. These became the first clear evidence that the crew had already begun losing men even during the waiting phase, before abandoning the ships. After years trapped in the ice, Sir John Franklin died in 1847. His death became a turning point for the expedition. Command passed to Captain Francis Crozier. For the first time, the expedition lost not just a man, but its symbolic center of leadership. After the first burials on Beachy Island and the long period of waiting in the ice, the expedition entered a strange state of prolonged silence. The ships were still standing, the supplies did not yet appear completely exhausted, shelter still existed, and discipline formally remained intact. And it was at this moment that a decision was made that still seems almost illogical from the outside. The crew abandoned the ships. The question that remains at the center of this story is simple: why would men who still had shelter, weapons, tools, and years of supplies decide to walk into the unknown Arctic wilderness, effectively signing their own death warrant? For a long time, this decision remained one of the greatest mysteries of the expedition. From the outside, it looked like an act of desperation without clear logic behind it. Only later investigations began to reconstruct a possible explanation. Analysis of the food supplies and storage conditions suggested that part of the provisions may have gradually spoiled because of poor sealing techniques used in canned food at the time. Inside the closed environment of the ships, this meant more than just food loss. It meant growing problems, food poisoning, worsening physical condition, reduced endurance, and the gradual collapse of the crew's ability to survive. Against this background, the ships no longer appeared to be a guarantee of safety. What had once been a survival base may have turned into a trap with limited and increasingly unreliable resources. It was then that the final decision was made: abandon the ships and attempt to travel south on foot toward the Back River, where they believed they might reach civilization or at least possible rescue routes. One of the groups eventually stopped along the route. It was there that later researchers discovered around 20 bodies. The bones of these men contained extremely high levels of lead, far above normal. This gave rise to the theory that the crew may have been slowly poisoned throughout the expedition by poorly sealed canned food, and that this could have critically affected both their physical and mental condition. Other groups continued moving, but none of them ever reached civilization. Years later, testimonies from Inuit witnesses added another disturbing detail. They described encounters with exhausted and disoriented men wandering through the Arctic in a state of extreme hunger and collapse. Some accounts mention behavior suggesting the complete breakdown of normal human psychology under isolation and survival conditions. But the most horrifying secret of the expedition would only become clear much later. As the surviving groups finally split into smaller bands of starving men, the struggle for survival descended into absolute horror. Modern anthropological examinations of bones discovered on King William Island revealed deep knife marks and cutting traces. These findings supported long-dismissed Inuit testimonies that, in the final months of the expedition, cannibalism had occurred among the remaining crew members. Starving, weakened by severe scurvy, and driven to the edge of madness by the cold, the last survivors were forced to consume the bodies of their dead companions in a desperate attempt to gain a few more days of life in the merciless Arctic wilderness. For decades, Britain launched numerous search expeditions that uncovered scattered traces, abandoned camps, personal belongings, fragments of equipment, and human remains across different parts of the Arctic route. Each discovery confirmed only one thing: the expedition had broken apart into isolated groups that died separately from one another. Only in the 21st century did a partial reconstruction of events begin to emerge. In 2014, HMS Erebus was discovered, and in 2016, HMS Terror was found. Both ships were astonishingly well preserved by the freezing Arctic waters, as if time itself had stopped inside them. But even these discoveries failed to provide a final answer. The story of the Franklin expedition remains one of the greatest unsolved tragedies in the history of exploration. We know when it began, we know where it ended, but we still cannot fully reconstruct the exact moment when 129 men became one of the Arctic's greatest mysteries.